Okay, how you all doing? Everybody still awake post-lunch? I see a few faces of people I've met. Hi, I'm Daniel. I think the most relevant experience I've had for large-scale commerce was working to bring the largest menswear store in Australia into the internet age. They've got, I think, 300 or so stores across Australia. There I really saw firsthand the value in the hub, not because they had it, but because they didn't. And there's a colossal amount of integration work as a result. I work for Ninefold. Ninefold is a high-performance Rails application hosting platform. We are wholly owned by a publicly listed company in Australia, and we've got our own data centers down there, and we've got our own hardware out on the West Coast. So we're pretty committed to this Rails thing. I'm talking about performance and I guess how hosting performance affects your ability to win customers and revenue. And pretty much our strategy is based on risk. There's Australia. What you do is you basically just sit in the game there and build up and build up and build up. Whilst everyone goes after Asia with their marketing strategy, it's impossible to hold, So you try to get those 7 extra units every turn, but the guy from Australia just suddenly comes and blitzes you because there's only one way in, one way out. So that's basically our strategy. That's where I'm from. I'm from New Zealand. So we didn't quite rate making the map for risk. Oh, that's a family photo. If you want Australia, just kind of fly up to Australia, and you'll find us there at the top of the world, kind of in the middle. If you want to come visit, I think you'll find with this talk that a lot depends on your point of view, and that's ours, CEO. That's the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and so we have an office in Sydney. We also have an office in San Francisco, and you can see that our bridge is quite bigger, a lot bigger there. It's about twice the size. Actually, that's to scale there. I guess my point there is that how you measure things makes a big difference. So we're going to be talking about our performance exercise and how we measure things. But first, why should you even care about performance? Well, there's 2 basic points of view I want to talk about. One is that you do it for your users. And the second is that you do it for the money. So let's start with the users. I mean, what do they even want? So Google asked their users and said, okay, what do you guys want? And they're like, well, we want more results in the page. It's like the first page. Who wants to go to the second page? Put more results on the first page. That'd be great. Thanks. So they did that, and obviously it's a bigger page, so it's another 500 milliseconds to load that whole page with the extra results, which caused a 20% drop in traffic and revenue. And so basically my point is that bad performance can ruin your UX. Even giving customers what they think they want is overweighed by the benefit is washed out, basically, if they don't get a snappy performance. So what does good look like? This is Google's sort of across the web measurement. So you can see that you're looking at 6 seconds. I mean, obviously, if you look at the difference between the mean and the median, there's always some pretty poorly performing sites dragging that up there. And you look at that and you go, okay, well, that's cool. We're much quicker than that. Great. Only problem is the mean is a lie. when you look at your average performance, it's not telling you quite as much as you think. So we all did Statistics 101 probably, somewhere along the line, and saw the lovely bell curve and its normalized distribution. And so when you think about your average performance, your mental model is probably something like this. You're thinking, okay, half of people are getting something better, or half of people, and it's going to look like this. This is not what we've found in our testing. In the real world, we've seen a response more like this. And I'm going to go into these test results in some more detail, but that's basically how I came to be speaking to you today, is that when we launched Ninefold, our Ninefold Rails platform, we wanted to do some benchmarking to see whether our performance was significantly better or not. And we chose Spree as one of the most popular open source platforms in the world to run our simulations and our test on. And the results we got were quite striking, and we reached out to the Spree guys. And it took us, several months before we actually thought, maybe Spree people would be interested in that. So here I am telling you about what we found. So I guess the thing to look at here is that spike out at the end. So what we've done here is we've taken the response time and we've put them into buckets across that horizontal axis. And the reason there's that spike out at the end is because otherwise the graph would be too wide. So we just said, okay, everything over, let's see if I can read this off here, everything over 2 seconds we'll just throw into one bucket. And so I'm going to go into some more detail there, but I just wanted to make that distinction between what you think about the mean and what's actually happening for your users, because obviously the experience out at that far end is a lot different than the experience in the middle of that hump. So, people spend a lot of time on buttons. I don't know, I've done a lot of products, maybe a dozen products over the last 15 years, and I've had death matches over button placement and button colors and text or no text and image or no image. Trying to optimize the conversion of every part through the conversion funnel. This is some of the pointy stuff. But basically, if when you click the button, nothing happens, then it really doesn't matter what your button design is, right? So let's get on to the nitty-gritty of the testing that we did that led to me coming here today. So the first step, we set up a server. We design a simulation, we throw simulated users at the server, and we measure the latency. That's the basic scheme here. So let's talk about the tools. I just want you to just soak in, someone did mention I'm the creative director at Ninefold, so I care about things, but just soak in the beauty of that logo. Just for a minute, because it does give you a bit of an inkling of the usability that is to come. So JMeter is a Java app. I used to program Java. When they said I used to be a developer, we're talking a long time ago. Java 1.1.2 or something like that, before Swing was integrated. Does anyone recognize any of those words? Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe I made this. I don't know. That's the kind of era it seems to be from. But it is, along with, I think, Gatling, one of the more popular testing tools for performance. If you don't like the interface, you could always just write yourself some XML, I guess. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a sad experience. Don't cry. There's Ruby JMeter. So that's better. It's for all you Ruby lovers. So here's the tool chain we kind of wound up with. Chrome, the developer tools, we'd use to inspect the clicks and see what's going on. Ruby JMeter gives us a domain-specific language for testing. It generates the JMeter XML that I showed you a moment ago, and then we're using Flood.io, which eats up that JMeter XML. Then you can spin up a grid of simulated users that then walk their way through that XML script, and then you get your measures and reports and response times. So that was our basic technical approach. So there's capturing some click data. Anyone who knows the spree thing might see that as familiar. So here's our test plan. There's some pretty obvious stuff there. There's a random timer that's to simulate sort of browse time. We've got first transaction, go to the home page. Second transaction, view a product. Third transaction, add a product to the cart. Fourth, view the product listing again. Dive into an individual product on the fifth there. Then do a search for a product. Then take a look at the cart, and then return to the home page. So that was our simulation. Now, I should say that all of our tests we've open sourced. They're up on our GitHub repo. So if you think that our simulation is not a good match with the real world, then please let us know, or put in a something in on GitHub and point it out. But this is what we went with. I mean, I think it's a reasonably clicky user. So from here on out, when I talk about the number of simultaneous users we're supporting, this is what they were doing. So my guess is they're maybe a little clickier than real world, but that's the test we went with. And you can see it's quite clean to write up, and we in the repo we've got a few other helper classes and stuff, but this is basically the test plan in this nice little domain-specific language. Okay, so then you want to run the test at scale, and so as I mentioned, we chose Flood.io for that. It does require a little bit of JMeter understanding. You can scale it up as big as you want to pay for, and you get the high-level results, and you get super granular results, like the time of every click and the server response from every request and all of that. So that's the sort of summary results you get. That's pretty simple, and then you can drill down, but that's just an example of the kind of things you get out of Flood.io. There's other options. This is one we chose. I think it's made by an Australian firm, so keeping it in the family. Who here would say they're like sort of familiar with AppDex and how it works? Okay, cool. So that's probably worth talking about. Actually, while I'm getting shows of hands, who would put themselves as being able to understand, say, the ins and outs of JSON and things like that versus other? Myself being in the other. So who's sort of developer-y enough to understand all that kind of stuff? All right, so that's maybe 2/3 or something like that. And then the rest of us, I guess, are the other people who have been dragged into the dark side of sales and marketing or whatever. Cool, thank you for that. So let's just run through AppDex a little bit. So the idea with AppDex is to get a measure, and AppDex is like an open measure, is to get a measure of what the response distribution looks like, right? So this is like, instead of looking at the bell curve, let's divide people up into different categories based on the latency. So if we set T as the acceptable response time, so you choose that standard for yourself. You know, say, okay, 1 second's fine, half a second, quarter of a second, whatever it is that you think is the acceptable response time. You set that as your standard. And then it's okay, anyone who gets below that standard, we're going to call them satisfied. Anyone who is between that standard and 4 times that standard, they're like going to put up with it, but they're not real happy. And then over 4 times that standard, or not completely non-responsive, they're frustrated. So it goes into this happy little formula here. My maths isn't really good enough to make sense of that, but I'm sure all the people who raised their hands before instantly grok that. So we decided to do our testing setting happiness as a constant. And this is quite important because generally speaking, let's say you're comparing 2 different hosting scenarios, right? So you say, okay, this one has got 2 gigs of RAM and however many virtual CPUs or whatever it is. And this one's got 4 gigs of RAM, and then this is the price, and then let's compare those. But it's not an apple and apples comparison, is it? Because the way that the platforms are set up, the underlying hardware and so on, gives you a massive variance in performance. And so what we decided to do was to do our testing setting happiness, user happiness as a constant. So I say, here's our happiness goal. Let's throw users at it and see how many users we can keep at that happiness for a given dollar figure. Does that make sense? So I think this is a reasonably unusual approach that we're quite proud of. So we set it at the AppDex score of 0.95 is basically saying where 95% of people are satisfied. Okay, that's what we're looking at there. And 0.75 is 750 milliseconds as being our definition of satisfactory. We benchmarked against Heroku because that is the most similar product to ours, although there are some differences. The biggest difference is, I guess, that we own our own hardware. So that's why we thought we'd probably be faster when we tested. That happiness threshold is much higher than we wanted. I mean, we really wanted to do a half-second one. Without putting the boot in too much, we wanted to show some Heroku results on the graph. And setting it at that standard, there was no points to plot. So we raised the bar. Or lowered the bar, something like that. Okay, so for those who are interested, we set these things as our Heroku settings. Now this was not easy. We wanted to have results that were bulletproof, and so we did hundreds of tests to try to find the optimal Heroku configuration to give them the absolute best chance. And we open source the results, so I want to stress that we really went out of our way to we tried so many different combinations of stuff to try to get the best results we could out of Heroku. So we chose 5 configurations between $100 a month and $1,000 a month. We did a 60-second ramp-up time before we started counting the results because we found Heroku needs a little time to wake up. And then did 300-second test. And then we varied the number of concurrent users to maintain that AppDex standard. So does this all track so far? Does that make sense? Random nodding. Good, good, good. Okay. So these are results we got. So what we were really pleased about is that black line, it looks straight, but it actually slowly curves away. So you're getting basically some economy of scale. And what we were really pleased about was that, you know, sizzling performance out of Spree was easy to achieve. We did no optimizations to our system. We still haven't done any Spree-specific optimizations to our system. We would like to do that. We've just in the very final stages of putting together our Spree partnership, so we'll be optimizing further. But this is just like out of the box. As you ramp up the number of concurrent users served, you know, the cost is like slightly better than a straight line for us. The purple one is Heroku. They recently, you know, identified this problem in the platform, and they've added the new PX servers. And so if you're at that scale of 250 concurrent users or more, then definitely, in fact, even at about 100 concurrent users, you're better off with PX if you're sticking with Heroku. And you can see there's a sweet spot there at 250. If you've got exactly 250 concurrent users, then it's a toss-up whether you should go with us or not. So let's talk about this consistent performance thing. So the key thing is, so I guess that slide is to say that people think often about performance at scale, right? How is my app going to perform as we get bigger? And that's a valid question, right? And it's a question most people put off, frankly. The ethos generally is that that's tomorrow's problem. Today's problem is focusing about delivering product features. And everybody who's gone down the Ruby and Rails path has made that choice, really. They've optimized for developer happiness. And I guess what I'm saying is there are some relatively straightforward ways to keep your developer happiness and give your users a better experience. That's really my challenge, I guess, to the Rails community is, okay, yep, optimize for your happiness and your productivity and whatever, but with a little bit of an eye to the future, you can make life sweeter for your users. So consistency of performance, that matters at any scale. This particular chart is only 50 concurrent users, so that is not a lot. Can I get a show of hands? Who would say that they would spike to? Let's say who would say that their store would never spike over 200 concurrent users? So 200 and less for your store. All right, and then let's say 700 and less. Who would fall into that category? Okay, and then like more than 700 concurrent users. Who would fall into that category? All right, cool. All right, how high do I have to go before I hit the ceiling? I could be here all day, I guess, taking guesses. But that's interesting, thank you. This one is just at 50 concurrent users. In this particular example, we spent twice as much on the Heroku, but basically you want everything over to the left. This isn't exactly fair because we spent twice as much on the Heroku configuration for this. That little outlier there is 1 in 20 clicks, right? So you think about the 95th percentile, and it's easy to go, oh, well, 95th percentile, you know, that's 1 in 20 clicks. I mean, that is really quite significant. If 1 in 20 clicks are out there and getting like 2 seconds before anything happens when you click a button, and that, you know, I mean, how many clicks, I mean, you guys probably know from your own analytics how many clicks a typical session has. I would say that 20 clicks would be on the low side, which means that if you've got performance problems at the 95th percentile, that means pretty much everyone who comes to your site is having one of those 1 in 20 clicks moments. So I wanted to, so there's our results that we got, and that's when we started engaging with the Spree guys, and we're like, hey, look at this is pretty cool. I mean, we're getting like really sound performance on a low-cost setup. This is pretty cool. And then I know Andrew Harvey, who was the guy who led the testing for us, got together with Ryan Big in Melbourne, and they chatted about it, and Ryan had a bit of a play. And before you knew it, I don't know, a few weeks, the Spree guys had turned around a caching version to even further boost the performance. So that was one of the first things we talked about. And then the next speaker at Dennis is talking about some of the front-end optimizations, but this was a back-end optimization we talked about. And these guys had it turned around in a few weeks, and it's now in the 2.2 master branch, I believe. Is that right, Ryan? Yes. I mean, that is insane. Like the speed at which it went from something we were chatting about, driven by data, to actually in the product, really made us excited about getting more involved with Spree. And so here's the results. These are hot off the press. We finished running these tests like a few hours before I flew out here. On the new, I mean, that's just phenomenal. So that peak, if you can't read off the graph, you know, the majority of people have gone from a 500 millisecond situation to a 200 millisecond, so it's like twice as good. And the dashed line there you can see is the 95th percentile. So the 95th percentile's gone from like 1.2 seconds to about 800 milliseconds or something like that. So that's a massive improvement, and they turned around so quickly. I'm really impressed. Anyone want to guess what the red line represents? The 95th percentile, that one, anyone? That's Magento. So we thought it would just be fun for the conference to set up a Magento situation. Ninefold has got virtual servers as well, so you can just spin up a standard server with a template. So we set up the same kit as this other test was run on, and those are the results. Yeah. So aren't you all happy that you're at this conference and not the Magento conference? So why does this stuff even matter? We've talked about the happy users. From the user point of view, we're talking about engagement, and I guess engagement is where happy users lead to better business outcomes for us all. So AOL, they did a study and found that the visitors who got the best 10% of load times viewed 3 times as many pages as those in the worst 10%. Yahoo, they improved their load time by 400 milliseconds on average. That increased their site traffic by 9%. But what about the money? You remember this slide from before? Do it for the money. I mean, engagement's good, and there's this sort of, flow-on effect of happy users and high net recommender scores and all that kind of stuff. But what about just like cold hard cash today? So Shopzilla took their load times from 6 seconds to 1.2. Page views are up 25%, so yay on engagement. Revenue up 12%. And you think about the other activities that you could, and look, there's a non-trivial amount of work that they did. But there is some real low-hanging fruit in this area. And we've seen that with adding the caching to Spree, So that just seems to be money sitting on the table to me. Amazon found that for 100 milliseconds of load time improvement they got sales increased by 1%. So, again, happy not to be on Magento here. So where should I host? So here's my little sales pitch on us, of course. I mean, you've seen the data. So we try to offer consistent performance. We found we had to run lots of tests on Heroku we had to average out the Heroku results, because from one dyno to the next, from one day to the next, the results were all over the map. All dynos are not created equal. It's inexpensive. We're the same price as AWS, basically. But you also save on sysadmin costs against the option of rolling your own, which is pretty significant. The smooth scaling, so you just scale up, cost per user stays about the same. Easy scaling, again, slider, scale up, an advantage over rolling your own. And just enough control. You can SSH in and have a look around. We don't really recommend that you fiddle around with it in there, because you're going to kind of break all the scaling and all that. But if you want to look in there and see what's going on, you can see what's going on. So your focus determines your power. And I guess my pitch to you is that while you're dicking around with some of these sysadmin tasks, you're not focusing on your product. Lastly, and I've obviously spoken much too quickly, I could do a little bit of interpretive dance to pad out my time, I suppose. That big stage beckons. I wanted to talk about our Yak program. That there is Brutus. He's our let us shave yaks for you Yak. And the Yak program is your app quicker. And what we'd like to do is benchmark. So we've done the sort of generic benchmarking on the Spree platform against Magento, against the cached and uncached versions. What we'd like to do now is start benchmarking individual people's real-world apps and seeing how they stack up. So our goal is to get 10 of you guys onto this Yak program and see how your performance stacks up. So what we do there is we clone your store, we design a simulation similar to the one that we did on the generic Spree thing, and so obviously there we would like you to say what would be a convincing simulation for you. We then run the simulation at scale, just like we did here, and benchmark the results. And the idea is that we would obviously publish some of the results if you guys were comfortable with that, but also sort of do some sort of slightly anonymized stuff to show the range of things, so you could get a feel for how your app is how your store's performing relatively. So we've got a table out there. I'm going to be floating around. We'd really like, we can only probably handle like the 10, because it's this testing stuff is a bit involved for us. It takes a lot of time, but it doesn't take a lot of time from your end. So please come and talk to me if you're interested in seeing how you perform. grab a T-shirt. That's my contact details, Ninefold contact details. Go and have a look at the testing yourself on our GitHub repo. It's all there. If you haven't yet found Flight of the Conchords, in the break, go YouTube Flight of the Conchords, New Zealand's best ever export. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks, Daniel. We do have some time for questions. So does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, please go easy on me. I'm not one of these, suit-wearing super developers. I'm just.
So you mentioned offloading the sysadmin tasks to you guys.
Yeah.
What level do you take that to? I mean, are you doing 24/7 app monitoring, or is it just sort of if it breaks, well, we'll let you know? How deep is your level of sysadmin for support for your clients?
Yeah, so we've got a massive bevy of alarm notifications set up that trigger off all sorts of events. We've got we don't outsource any of our support, so we've got the San Francisco office in US hours. We've got the Australian office in the Australian hours. And so beyond that, I'll have to get you to talk to Ryan at our desk. He knows all the ins and outs of it because he has to field all those.
Sure. I guess specific examples. Let's say the app goes down at 2 in the morning. Is Ninefold going to go in and bring it back online, or are they just going to send the alerts to? Yeah,
so at the moment, it's more a send the alerts type thing.
Okay.
But yeah, there you go. There's Ryan, so he'll be able to answer that for you.
If it's an app problem. If it's an app problem, they can be monitored like via New Relic. So New Relic is actually one of our partners, and we definitely recommend using them, or some sort of app level monitoring. But if the system goes down, we wake up and we fix it. So, hope that answers your question.
Any other questions I can pass off to Ryan? Yeah.
Peter, right
down here.
Peter right down.
I've got 2 spree stores using Heroku, and we're definitely sensitive to price and speed, but also we get a lot out of, at least from the developer side, the marketplace and specifically the database. They've got a very large scale of database options, up to far more than I could possibly afford, but it's nice to have it. Can you tell me about what you have in that area?
Yeah, we have a similar set of options for databases, including sort of follower databases and all that kind of thing. So whilst we have a smaller set of add-ons in Heroku presently, we haven't found, we've found like some quick edits to some gem files, and most of those add-ons are running fine. But yeah, for databases, we have all of those scaled up options. Yeah. I mean, I won't go as far as to bring it up, but it's all there on the pricing page. Slider, see all the options. There's like a calculator thing. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the benchmarks. I'm wondering, so there was a version with caching, and I'm wondering which programs you use for the cache, to hold the cache.
So the caching is built into Spree, right, Brian? I mean, it's not a third-party thing. It's now part of the Spree master branch.
Was it Redis or Memcache?
Ryan's the guy for that.
You can use either Redis or Memcache. Sorry. You can use either Redis or Memcache for the caching backend. We'd recommend using Redis though, because it has a delete matched method, and the delete match method allows us to delete the keys. In certain circumstances, what will happen is you'll end up deleting, on Memcache, you'll end up deleting all the Spree product pages, but on Redis, it'll only target the specific product pages to delete. We can't work around that in Memcache as far as I know. So, yeah.
We have both options are in the Ninefold hosting environment by default. So they're all just standing. Yeah, they're not an add-on. They're just built in as a first-class component.
This is a question for Ryan, I guess. But the caching stuff, is that in 2.2 stable? Is that, or you said you tested on 2.2?
Yeah.
So is that in 2.2 stable now, or is that something that's coming soon?
Yeah,
or?
no, it says.
It's in
Yeah,
there
so
now?
it was, I don't know, it hasn't been there very long, right? 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's migrated into the main body amazingly quickly.
Is that kind of like the Rails like Russian doll caching or something, or is it just? Yeah. Okay.
When are Ninefold going to be available in Europe?
So that was one for Andrew Sharp, actually, sitting next to Ryan there.
The more I get asked that question, the faster it's going to happen. So come and see us. Anybody who wants us in Europe, come and see us downstairs. We get a list from you guys. If we can actually convince, have enough demand there, then we'll actually look to deploy or to set up our infrastructure in Europe. It's on the roadmap. It's how quickly it happens depends on you guys.
Yeah, basically, if there's the demand, we've got a sort of templated rollout, so we can do it relatively quickly now. After rolling out in the valley, so we sort of have a template for that, so we can do that pretty quickly if there's lots of people who want it.
In those Heroku benchmark results, were you running the app in Unicorn?
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't know the ins and outs of how Heroku's platform works, but do you have theories?
I don't think I'm the only one.
Right. Yeah. Do you have theories about why there's such a performance gap, or like why?
Yeah. Well, so a lot of it's not their fault. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Heroku. I mean, I had with some friends, we had a Rails dev shop almost a decade ago. That's how long it's been floating around, and I still remember. The first day someone came and showed me Heroku. It's pretty cool. Now I've forgotten the question. What's the question?
Why
Oh yeah. So obviously there's the way they've implemented the load balancing. I think is definitely part of it. But what we found was that from one dyno to another, it was radically different. Like I remember the first dyno we did. It's like, oh shit, this is we haven't got much performance on these guys. We obviously got a good dyno, and the next day I was like, we've screwed up our test. Holy shit, this is terrible. And it was just all over the place. And I can't remember who it is, but one of the big customers loads up. I can't remember who it is, but they load up a dyno. They run performance tests over it. They shoot it in the head. If they fail, and they pull up another one. So they go through that process before they release the dyno into the wild on their site. So I think that's because they're built on top of AWS. For us, we're built on top of our own hardware. So we're able to do at-scale pricing and all the rest because we're the largest managed hosting provider in Australia. We do like most of the government work and all that. So, we just control the whole stack. And we've only just begun in terms of what we can do to optimize the stack for Rails and for Spree. But that's why we thought a priori we would outperform. When we went into the testing, but we're a bit surprised at how great the gap was. It's closed a lot with PX, the PX option, but it's still basically 40% more expensive than the underlying AWS hardware, and we set our pricing against that AWS level, so we haven't got that 40% margin.
Why don't we just do one more?
Andrew's now going to correct me.
No, I'm just going to add to one of the things that Daniel did, and I looked at a lot of what the difference between their X1, X2 and the PXs were. In the X1, X2, you used all the shared resources above the slug in terms of all the routing. What's changed with the PX is they've gone to what our model is, which is we give you a dedicated DOMR, we give you a dedicated virtual route from the internet all the way down to your VM, which is a lot more similar to what the PX does. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen this consistency. They've had problems with the consistency because if you're sharing all that routing resources, you're at the whims of whoever's next to you and how much traffic they've got going. The PX solves that, but that's stuff out of the box from even our most basic individual server. You get that same unique routing down to the box.
And we don't put apps on the shelf either. It's reserved from the outset, so our apps never go to sleep, anything like that. So we're going to do one last one. Anything on that side of the room been a bit neglected over there? Anyone else? All right, thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Daniel. Thank you.